Shireen Schmalz, and I have been here forever, and I'd like to tell you about the very beginnings of faith. First of all, we were approached to become a Trinity edition during World War II because of gas rationing. And my father was one of the people approached. And so he and several other families from Trinity started the branch of Trinity Sunday School down at the Whitaker Elementary School. It was called Finneytown Elementary School at that time. That involved Stan and Mary Werns, Herm and Mill Oberkorn, my parents, but it was a couple of years before it became a church. And then we were certified from the American Lutheran Church to become a full-fledged congregation. And we continued to worship until we could get a pastor, Arthur Danke, who came down from up in northern Ohio, and he started going door to door to door to door in this area. Obviously, there weren't as many doors as there are now. As we grew in numbers, we needed money, and so we had lots of fundraisers. I can particularly remember the bake sales that we held up in Mount Healthy. The man named Mr. Shaw had an electric shop, and he left us put tables out in front of his store, his shop, and the women baked and people came outside and bought. We had suppers. We had big suppers at the riding stable that is located underneath some of the stores now in Brentwood Shopping Center. And people came, everybody came, and all the money went toward the building fund. And that's how we got going, and we grew. And Pastor Danke's philosophy was, bring them in and then make them Lutherans.
I'm Stan Werns, the younger Stan Werns. My father was a charter member of Faith, as was my mother. I was attending Trinity, and Dad asked me, did I want to play, that there was going to be an opportunity here at Faith when we were attending down in Whitaker School. I told him no, I wanted to go to a real church. I didn't want to go in a gymnasium for worship. Well, a month went by, and he told me, to him to whom much is given, much is required. They still didn't have an organist, and he had agreed that I could temporarily fill in on their organ. Now, their organ was a little pump organ, an Army field organ. You increased the volume by pushing two levers with your knees, one to the left and one to the right. The one to the left controlled the lower tones, the one to the right, the upper tones. There were no stops to pull. You had full organ or nothing. And if you stopped pumping, you had nothing. The first communion service, you wouldn't believe. I was playing along. A whole note got 4 beats. And I was the one who established the rate of the beats. Well, I played a whole note and I finished it. And I went on to the next notes. Well, there were many words to get to under that whole note. And so the fiasco continued, but the congregation was very forgiving. And before the next communion service, I had learned to read the words under the notes and sing along with the congregation.
We moved out to Finneytown in 1942, and there was no church, so we went over to College Hill to a Presbyterian church until they started the church in, it's Whitaker School now, used to be Finneytown Grade School. So I started there. I've been there ever since. Well, I was in a gymnasium, and all the chairs were set up there, and then we had Sunday school in different rooms in the school. And of course, I went to school there from all the way through the 8th grade.
In those days, Sunday school for the boys was in the boys' locker room. And Ernie Staubach was our teacher. I suppose the girls went to the girls' locker room, and Hazel Shannon was a teacher. Hazel Shannon also happened to be the cook for Whitaker School. And I think it was through her influence that we were allowed to have potluck dinners down in the school, in their cafeteria. What a delightful time. Everybody was bringing their best, and it was hard to pick the dessert that you were going to take. So on occasion, Lou Danke and I would split a dessert, and we'd get 3 or 4 desserts and then go back to the table and share.
I have some silly memories and some little kid memories. I can remember my first, what we called our piece that we had to say at the Christmas program down at the elementary school. And my verse started, "Consider the lilies of the field." That's all I can remember, but I can remember that.
Reverend Danke would take us fishing on a trip up to Michigan. He drove us up there. We stayed up there, slept in a tent, went fishing and swimming in the lake. We collected money from going around getting newspapers, put them in Al Shore's garage. And we got enough papers, we went down and sold them. It was the Luther League. That's how we started. Then all the girls, they started helping us, and they wanted to go with us. So then we had to get chaperones and cabins. And
The first year on the trip, we went to Lake Hamilton in Indiana. It's up in the northeast corner of Indiana. And my recollection is it was just one car, Reverend Danke's car. And there were 5 boys. Maybe we squeezed in a 6th one in that Studebaker, I'm not sure. But Lou Danke and Gene Messick were part of the crew. We went to Lake Hamilton and we spent the week. We'd have our devotions each day, and we'd fish and we'd throw horseshoes. We just had a wonderful time. The next year it expanded a little bit. And now I don't remember if we went to a Spider Lake, or there was another lake up near there. I don't remember the name of it. Lake Coldwater. I don't know which one came next. And then the 3rd year, we took along girls. And Hazel Shannon went along as a cook, and Ernie and Marie Staubach went along as cooks. Ernie, you may recall, had been a scoutmaster, and he loved to cook. In fact, he would cook our Easter morning breakfast, along with some assistance from other men, and they served that breakfast. But anyway, we went to Spider Lake and Coldwater Lake, and then there were several years we went to Lake Leelanau, and always just had a wonderful time. And after the 3rd year, girls and boys both went. And then the church bought this piece of land on Winton Road, north of Galbraith. It was purchased from Al Shorey, and I think it was 3 lots that they bought. And they began building the church. Well, we had to have electricity, and we were fortunate to have electricians in the church, Harry Hennon and Dick Messick.
Yeah, my dad was an electrician. He wired it. He wired the whole building. He was a union electrician, and he wasn't allowed to work other jobs, so he trained Stan Werns.
I remember when we were doing the basement, Dick Messick was going down and he'd lick his finger and he'd stick it up in the socket. And I said to him, "What are you doing?" He said, "I'm making sure there's juice there." I said, "But we don't have concrete. You're standing in water. What if you get it wrong?" He said, "I wired it." He was very confident of his work. And he explained that if you touched the side of the socket, which was a negative, and stuck your finger into the center of the socket, where the positive was, that then you only got the shock through that joint.
I have some memories about the first building here, the first sanctuary. I know my father and Stan Werns did a lot of work. My father lost part of his thumb as he and Stan were constructing the pulpit. I can remember the men being over here many, many evenings. There's few times that we had any professional help in building that first sanctuary because we didn't have the money. And so the men did it. And on that night before we were going to have our first worship, I can remember getting my clothes ready, and my mother said I was allowed to wear my new red and white saddle Oxfords to church that day because it was a celebration. I can remember my aunt sitting in the pews that we got from St. Mark's up in Delaware. They had like breaks in the pews, and my Aunt Catherine got her bottom pinched, and we thought that was so funny. We had a choir. We had a senior choir, and we had a junior choir, and we came to practice at Mrs. Siebold's house over in Parkview Heights.
And of course, we first only had the parish hall underneath the sanctuary. And then came time we needed to expand because we had many more in Sunday school than would fit in the classrooms. And so they built the additional parish hall out the back.
Good morning. My name is Ralph Getz, and I've been a member of Faith Lutheran Church for 70 years now. And we moved to Finneytown in December of 1952. So back in those days, I remember when we started going there, Pastor Danke, for a couple of years he was there, and then in 1955 we had Pastor Micah Feller. So Pastor Micah Feller was my confirmation class pastor, And he was very strict, and he was a nice guy, very nice guy, warm, but boy, was he strict. And in his class, you didn't mess around. He had a ruler, and he'd really let you know if you was out of line. He'd hit you on the knuckles. So, but he was a wonderful guy, and he was my confirmation class pastor. Yeah, I remember the days of the early church. It was a different world. Brentwood Shopping Center wasn't there, and it was a little country road with a little country church. So we actually, our confirmation class would meet in the old church in the upper balcony. So to get there, if you were on Winton Road, you had to climb these quite a few stone steps up to the front doors, and believe it or not, that church had two big wooden doors with handles on them. Reminded me of Luther's church in Germany, great big doors. And you go inside, there was what you would call a mini narthex, a little entrance area. And then off to the right-hand side was a spiral staircase that led up to the balcony right above the entrance of your head there. So with the main body of the sanctuary straight ahead. And the altar that we have in the chapel today is the same altar that was in the original church. But when you go to the parish hall now, my dad and I put up those two columns that hold the roof up over the entranceway. My dad and I put them in because the other ones were wrought iron and they were rusted out. So we bought these and took them out and put those in. My dad also, from scratch, from a piece of lumber, made the handrails going up to the altar today in the new sanctuary. New sanctuary was started in 63 and completed in 64. So those were my early high school days. I can remember riding the bus, passing the church, seeing that crane put those big steel I-beams up. And if you look at the ceiling today, you'll see concrete, but underneath that concrete are big steel beams. The skeleton of the building was all steel. Yeah, that's my mom and dad in the picture there, straight ahead in the back. Yeah, I can remember that. And I know that after the new sanctuary was built, in 64, for about 2 years, we had a piano. So in about 66, we got the first organ. And it wasn't a new one, it was a used one, and we got it from Northern Ohio. So, and that was in there for all them years until just recently, we replaced it with the new organ. And that old organ was a fire trap. It was kaputzed.
When I was younger, it was a lot more structured, but the seed was planted. Like so many people probably of that generation, faded away for quite a few years, but then when I started my family, those seeds grew and drew me back. And since that day, it's growing stronger and stronger. Some of it has to do with growing up here. Most of it is just my own internal faith in the drawing to Jesus Christ, the gospel, and the teachings. If I could tell somebody, it's a fulfillment like nothing else in life. Just that connection with Christ and the Holy Spirit. And learning more and more as I get older to try and help others know that love and that peace. The blessings and the grace and the mercy of God is with us now and forever.
Any fun memory from catechism or anything like that? I've heard that...
That's a set-up question.
Well, Shireen Schmaltz said she had you and Ted Hubbard in Sunday school.
I can also remember teaching Sunday school. I taught Chris Tobbitts and Ted Hubbard in Sunday school.
Yeah, Chris and I were in the same confirmation class. Everybody was born in 1954. we were all in the same confirmation class. We had a big confirmation class. I mean, we had, I think it was close to 50 people. I think that's a fair number. It was in the upper 40s, 50 people. So, but that wasn't unusual because this community was huge. I can remember when I was real young going into the old sanctuary. We had a balcony, and a lot of times I would sit up there with Mom and Dad. I can remember going up to the balcony, and but the new sanctuary, I mean, back in those days I remember when it was first opened up, and we had a full house that day. It's a great time.
Hello, I'm the old pastor, the retired pastor, the pastor that doesn't have to work as hard. That is great. Bob Curry. I served here at Faith for 25 years and got to retire here. When I first came, Lee Schroyer was the president of the congregation, and we stayed at her house overnight. And so she was the first person I heard pray. And I could tell of her faith, and that makes quite an impression when you first arrive to interview at a congregation. Okay. I fasted for 3 days and asked the Lord to show me if I should take the call or not. And the next day, the secretary of the church up in Michigan came in and said, "You wouldn't believe it. Last night I had a dream about you that you were leaving." And I went, "Oh, boy." And that was a little something. And one of my wife's friends, within those 3 days, said, "I see you at a new church with people with their hands up in the air." And I went, "Well, that's nice. It's coming in pretty good." And so we had a peace about coming, and we got here, and people treated us nice. So it was a nice fit for that 25 years. Some of the highlights is I learned if you're going to change the carpeting in the church, don't bother with a committee, because no one likes the same colors. So we tried a committee and could not get anyone to agree with the colors. So this is my choice. One of the changes we made while I was here was to have communion each week. And I was the new guy, so they kind of put up with a trial and for a couple months, and then they were ready to go back to once every month. And one of my older friends in the congregation wanted it back the way it used to be. And I said, "Well, do you only kiss your wife once a month?" And he didn't answer at all, because whatever he answered would be used against him. Both he and his wife have gone to be with the Lord, and so he never has to think about my question anymore. The first ones had pictures on the wall that were black and white, and I used to tease Pastor Kuhlman that he was falling out of favor because his colored photo was turning back and luckily mine's still doing okay. It's been a good congregation. Part of my learning over the 25 years is you're helping people through life and into eternity.
Yeah.
And after a couple years, you look at the people who have passed, and well, he's passed and she's passed. And then at the end of 25 years, you look back at the beginning and you go, wow, people have gone to be with the Lord. And and others you've ministered to them, and then they go and they get transplanted all over the place, not just in the Lutheran Church, but they'll go to other places, and that's good. I've got a lot of joy of working with the people. We started a band to use in our contemporary worship service.
Still going?
Yeah, and when we first got it, Herta Christ gave the money for the drum set in honor of her husband, and then I didn't have any drummers. So I prayed to the Lord, Lord, we got a really nice drum set here, I think, and we could use a drummer. And 3 weeks later, a couple comes in, and all of a sudden they wanted to join after 2 weeks of being here. And they said, by the way, we're both drummers. And I'm going, well, we can handle that. But it was just one of those answered prayers, more than you could, be thankful for. So we had 2 sets of drums, one a drum set and one conga and bonga drums, and so they both enjoyed being part of the team at that point, and they were with us for a while.
I moved here obviously because I had a job here, but I've stayed because I love the community, I love the church, I love the people. We preach the gospel. It's a biblical church, relates to my values.
Lutheran Church. I have been part of this faith family for 7 years now. I was not looking for a job, but I was called to investigate what this position entailed to work for God's kingdom. And I have found a group of people here, both the pastor and the members of this faith family, to walk this walk with. So it's more than a job to me. It is a second family, and it is a place where I can grow in my faith and have conversations about God and salvation and my walk with God, and another way for me to share that with other believers. So
we're raising our children to be Christ followers, not people of the world. And we find that here.
And then when I look at other churches, there are probably other churches out there that do it. But it seems like they're becoming harder and harder to find.
Yeah.
And we found this one, so it's worth the effort of coming that extra distance, because we want to go to where we can better grow and understand the Lord and worship.
course, 2020 was a difficult year at Faith. It was difficult on everyone with COVID and the lockdowns. But thanks to a dedicated church council who met every week during the restriction, we were able to open our doors again on Mother's Day of 2020, and our doors have remained open. We're dedicated to sharing the gospel of Jesus Christ with the world, with the lost, with those in our community and those in our lives around us. We know we can face anything that comes because our faith continues.
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 Our faith continues.